So, a couple days ago, I passed the A plus Core 1 exam, which basically, in short ish terms, is the first half of the A plus certification process where you take that exam and it covers mostly hardware and like troubleshooting steps with hardware. But more of my purposes in talking about this is to kind of contrast kind of what I was expecting and what I had researched about it before taking it and what actually happened after the fact. So, leading up to it, I had basically. So, part of school is that there's a special A plus prep course that basically, for the most part, gives you a few resources that you can use or a few ideas of resources to go and check out, and then sets you free to kind of study for it, prep for it, then it gives you a few practice exams for you to do that they then, after you do those practice exams, gives you the, what's the word? Gives you the voucher code in order to go take the Core 1 exam. So first of all, what I was told would happen was I would get like 3 performance-based questions at the start of it. It'd be like 84 questions, and that some of that was somewhat accurate. So the performance-based questions were the first things up. But I'd actually had 4 performance-based questions at the start of it, which I had been told there would be 3. And then come to find out, another guy, he had like 5 of those at the start of it. So the performance-based questions vary if you're looking at doing it. Kind of keep that in mind, is the number of performance-based questions you're going to get will vary from for whatever reason. Now, the other interesting part is you're told in all the prep work, even in Comptia's own objectives list, is that you'll have up to 90 questions. And most people are like leaning around, it's going to be like 84. So I'm sitting here expecting 84 questions, and I get into it and it's 75. So a lot of the expectations that I had had for that stuff was basically what? But it really wasn't that bad. I still got it done within 30 to 40 minutes, which they give you a whole 90 minutes to do it, which was the only consistent part about it, except for maybe the expectation of time for like check-in time if you're doing it via an online proctor, and checkout time for the survey and whatnot. So you've got the extra time for check-in and then some checkout survey stuff once you're done with the test, actually. And I mean, that's normal processing stuff, which you're mainly focused on getting the test done and the main portions of the test. So the other thing is, I was looking at other people that had taken the Core 1, was the types of questions that would frequently show up. And everybody's like, there's a lot of printer stuff. There's a lot of printer stuff. There's a lot of printer stuff. And I don't know what it was, whether it was the random set of questions that I got, or just the fact that Comptia may have adjusted their question algorithms. But I didn't get that many printer questions. I was expecting like, printer, 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 printer. So I studied up a little bit more heavily on laser printers, because that was kind of the more questionable part that I wasn't quite sure on. And then I had like 1 or 2 laser printer questions, and that was it. The rest of it was kind of, for the most part, around other topics. So one of the things I did in preparation was doing there's Test Out, who was recently bought out by Comptia, and they have a full pool of questions, practice exam questions, that you can take. And I basically went through and did all of their questions and basically figured out, where am I lacking, this, that, and the other. Which looking at it in hindsight, yes, it was a good move because then I knew where to focus. Now I'm looking at it and it's like, was that really the best use of my time to go through all of those questions and then to kind of cover most everything anyway with it? So maybe this time around for the Core 2, I may do it slightly differently to where I do a few practice exams before actually going in for the full study. But for the most part, I think the interesting thing for me was like the hardware stuff is kind of like I haven't focused so much on hardware in my experience, well, hobby experience per se. And I still passed. But I think that would be one of the lower ones because I focus less on hardware and more on the software side of things. So depending on where you're at, if you're more hardware, more focused on hardware and working with hardware, then you may have an advantage with it. But there's also the thing where the thing that Comptia seems to be expecting in the Core 1 is basically what you would do in a corporate work environment. And some of the answers that I would give are not the same that would be the case in that environment for most people, or the standard for that situation. Let's see, the other thing, so when doing practice exams, one thing I figured out really quick and probably is the biggest detriment to a pass or fail is paying attention to the questions. So as I did different practice exams, I started to notice that I would get the opposite answer that they were looking for, and that was because I wasn't paying attention to what they were asking. So when I actually did the exam, I worked really hard on paying attention to what was actually being asked and what they were expecting. So that's kind of the main thing I would focus on, is actually remember to pay attention. Don't assume what they're asking for, and learn to cut out the fluff that they add in, because you'll find questions that add in details that have nothing to do with what they're asking. So sometimes you read over the scenario that they pose, and then you read the question. Then you go back to the scenario and see, okay, I don't need this detail, I don't need that detail. This is the detail I need to focus on. And then your answers, if it looks like more of them, you kind of eliminate the least likely ones and then kind of pick the best one there. And that will probably be your best way to success. And what I found in the practice exams is later on as I was doing that, the answer that was correct, if I got a question wrong, the answer that was the correct one was basically my next choice in line. So by doing that and actually paying attention instead of like skimming over the question and then clicking an answer just to get through it, it does a lot. You pick a better answer and one that's closer to what they're looking for. I'm not sure how they grade it exactly to where it's like, oh, you got really close, so that's a partial one, but most of the questions are basically multiple guess. The practice or performance-based questions can vary from doing a mock simulation of setting up Wi-Fi to just dragging and dropping label boxes into boxes to tell you what to use to connect to what, or what, like, the different ordering of things. So if you're looking at, like, doing the A+ stuff, those are kind of the expectations I would look at and the things to look out for. And kind of the biggest things that I would pay attention to is kind of, again, pay attention to the question. If you're involved in tech, then it's a lot easier to skim over those questions, especially when you've done a lot of that. So you've got to pay real close attention to it. Otherwise, you may get just barely under that margin of failure. So if you appreciate the content and that kind of thing, then don't forget to check out the links in the description box, leave a like, feed the algorithm, that kind of thing.